Welcome to this, the 5th anniversary party of the Leisure World Historical Society. Most of you probably know that I'm a historian. And when I arrived here in 1992 and discovered there was no historical society, given the significance of this community among senior communities in the United States, I thought that I would try to get one organized. We've had wonderful cooperation from the administration, and we have had a small but dedicated group of members of the leisure world who have worked over these years to try to collect information and get our society underway so that there would be no chance whatsoever that we would not be able, in the words of Proust, to have a remembrance of things past. Our group at present is small. We have about 40 members, of whom 12 to 15 work often, and the rest are supporters, as it were. We could welcome additional members. The dues are $5. Members can pay for next year if they wish to, because it's convenient. Howard Rolfe is over there. If anyone wishes to join us, we would very much like to have you do so. In addition to the monthly minutes, so that you will know what we are doing, we are planning to have quarterly reports of activities of one sort or another, and of course there is always the yearly annual report. But we would welcome you as members, whether you want to actively participate in or just support our activities. Our society has a number of functions. To me, as a historian, the most important is providing an archives of documents of one sort or another, which records the past history of this community. But in addition to the collection of those materials, we use occasions such as this to share with you information of individuals who have been a part of our past. On the one hand, it brings back pleasant memories to those who have been here for a long time, but to those who are new, it is important, I think, to learn something about their roots, find out things that have happened that you might never have imagined. For example, how many of you know that when this leisure world community was established, there was free medical service? It didn't last very long. They had troubles all over the place. And we have had rather other interesting experiences that you have a chance to learn about through our organization. This is a community which has a multitude of organizations. There is almost no activity that I can think of that isn't represented in this community. And if it isn't, and you want to start it, I think you could succeed in doing so. Of course, one of the most important functions in any community is the religious life of that community. And the administration has done what it could to support the activities of the various churches, to help them form, to enable them to function if they wish to do so. And in addition to that, the many congregations which exist in this community, we have a religious council in which the various church groups work together in the interest of supporting the religious spiritual and physical needs of this community. It is memories of this activity within our society that we wish to talk about this evening. We have a panel who will tell you something about various aspects of this religious life, and then afterward, if there is time, there may be some of you who would like to share your memories of some aspect of our religious life. To moderate this panel is my wife, Claire Walker, who at the present moment is the head of the Religious Council. Claire?
Thank you, Ken. Now, I hope you can hear, and I hope you will continue to make a great fuss if you can't. There's no way that the speaker who isn't being heard realizes that, you know, unless you speak up or do something, such as stamp your feet, wave your arms, squeal, groan. That's enough suggestions. You ought to be able to get one of those you could use. We have an opportunity tonight to honor the religious life of this community and to be appreciative of the archives that we are building up on the early experience of the various religious groups. Whether you use the word religious or whether you use the word spiritual, it doesn't matter. You can use the word that means the most to you. In any case, both of those words are connected chiefly with the important values in an individual's life. They may or may not have any connection with the church. They may or may not have any connection with all sorts of other things that are talked about. The important thing is the opportunity that you have. It is being thought, especially in this day and age, to realize and to work toward the highest values that you can think of. We are being told that as we mature as a species and as a society, that we will be moving all the time toward higher and higher values. A man in India wrote a book. The book's title is Beyond Man. And in the United States, because that was not quite politically correct, the women don't like to be left off the title, of course. The book, when it was published here, had a new title, Beyond the Human Species. So that we are getting a great many ideas, new thoughts, new glimpses, new concepts in the time that we are alive. So that Leisure World's religious community may or may not be connected with churches. You are all spiritual in some way. So says the man in India who wrote the book. And he believes that we all have a tremendous amount of evolutionary progress to make before we're really going to be a species, a human species, the highest that we know. And one of the great poets felt the same way. He said the time would come, he hoped, when man's general infancy would begin. Hasn't even begun yet, according to him. I have been asked so many times what the Religious Council is all about that I've lost track of the number. I thought perhaps you would like to know what the purpose of the Religious Council is, and then you will be able to help answer all the questions that people in Leisure World ask. The purpose of this group, according to its official bylaws, is to promote, facilitate, and coordinate the work of the religious faiths in Leisure World. And those religious faiths All are different, and all are tied, however, to one common concept. It doesn't say this in the bylaws. I'm just adding a comment to it. They're all tied to the recognition by every one of us that there is something greater than ourselves, that all of us are part of, and that all of us have some contact with in our own terms. Now, the second purpose is to serve in an advisory capacity to the Board of Directors of the Golden Rain Foundation. And 3, to develop a spiritual awareness. See, there's the same idea with different words that will help stabilize the community. Once when I was starting out on a new job, and I was very young in those days, in a small town, I said to my boss, the principal of the school, I don't think I'll go to any church. Well, he said, I understand that. Lots of people don't want to go to any church, but look at it this way. Would you like to live in a place, in a city or a town, where there weren't any churches? Well, that was a good comeback, wasn't it? I didn't really have a good answer for that. To promote the interests of the religious groups in Leisure World. We have religious groups in this community who are officially established as members of the club groups of the community, but we have some that are not. For instance, we have a number of Quakers who live in this community, but they don't meet officially in Leisure World. You probably know some other groups who live in this community but don't meet officially in Leisure World. That means they don't have official recognition. So it's number 5, to support worthwhile enterprises, and that's one of the best uses for a religious council. When we meet, which is every month, the second Tuesday afternoon at 4 o'clock, and then Lutheran Church has a very nice room which they let us use for our regular meetings. We talk about all of those things, whichever of those are immediate and most pressing come up on our agenda first. Now tonight we have 3 members speaking for 3 organizations or groups of this religious community. And we're mighty glad to have them. They're our guests of the Historical Society, and they kindly consented to come and be with us. I will call first on Dr. Richard Edgar of the Community Church, and he is over there at the left. And then I will call upon Mr. E.R. Stevenson, and he is sitting at this end of the table. He will speak for the Catholic Church, the Catholic group. And then last, but certainly not least, I will call upon Rabbi Sidney Guthman, who has been in this community for a long time, officiating as a rabbi of the congregation Shalom. We lost him last year because he decided that retirement was beckoning him. Since then, he's been pretty busy going around places because there were several Jewish groups who particularly wanted to honor him for his long service. Now, for one of them, you will be interested to know perhaps, is the United States Senate, where he has been called back to open the Senate hearing with the opening prayer many times already. So, without saying too much more, you probably would all agree I've already said quite enough. I think we'll ask Dr. Edgar to speak and tell us what he would like to, as early as his memories go back.
Thank you. I appreciate being invited to do this because it caused me to look back in the records of Community Church and to find out what happened in the early days of the church, and I want to share just some of that with you. When I came to the church as pastor in 1983, I was able to get acquainted with many of the pioneers of community church. Most of them are gone now, and we still have, that I know of, several. Maida Hicks, who just had her 101st or 102nd birthday, Clara Lorig, who is now at Beverly Manor, Pearl Sweet, Doris Sevilla, Leona Burke, and Alice McKenzie, and Frances Hawkins, who just had her 99th birthday. So to survive, you have to be pretty old to have been a pioneer with the church. But these pioneers were wonderful people, and one of the early pastors says, I've just never found a group of people that is so talented and so dedicated. And it must have been an exciting time in Leisure World in those days. 1962 was the date when this community church was organized. And as people began to come into Leisure World from all around the United States, and it was a brand new community, and it was a place where you felt comfortable because everybody was in the same boat. They had all just moved, and they'd all landed here, and it must have been an exciting time to get in on the very beginnings of Leisure World. The Southern California Council of Churches decided sometime in 1962 that there should be a community church, a Protestant church in Leisure World. And they had a system by which they would determine which denomination would start a church in new communities. And they selected the Methodist Church to begin this community, but they insisted that it should be a multi-denominational church. Now that's the very unique thing about community church, because it was always intended to be, and always has been, a church that serves some 30 denominations. Now there are other churches in Leisure World, Protestant churches, that are serving groups, but this church has always kind of prided itself on the fact that, well, as one pastor says, we have many beliefs, but one faith. Council of Churches planning director met with the recreation director of Leisure World in July of 1962. They invited 7 new residents of Leisure World to meet with them, and at that time they determined that they would begin a community church in Leisure World. This led to a meeting on July the 22nd of 1962, in which they called together those that might be interested in organizing a church. 123 people responded. It was in this building that they started out, and they formed an organizing committee, and the Methodist Church agreed to purchase land for this new church. There were 123 people that met together. They then secured a pastor, Reverend Harold Baker, who was uniquely suited for this community because he had been in work with older people as a superintendent of a retirement home, and he was called to be pastor of this church. Now it's kind of interesting that their dreams were pretty big, or their vision, for it says that since the church services have now an attendance, this is in the very early months, attendance of 200, However, it must be borne in mind only apartments in Unit 1 have been occupied. And it is estimated that when Leisure World is completed, attendance should reach somewhere between 6,000 and 7,000. Now that is a joke, but that's what they expected at that time. And you can see, because of course there was to be about 9,000 residents in Leisure World, and they expected most of them would be a part of Community Church. The Community Church met in this building, and then in December they grew, and Clubhouse 2 was built, and they then started meeting in that church, and the Catholic Mission Church was also meeting there at 8 o'clock, and the Community Church had their meetings at 9 and 9:30 and 11. At a later time, the Calvary Baptist Church started meeting in Clubhouse 2, and the note in the bulletin indicated that would those of you that are coming to the 9:30 service please not arrive before 9:15, because the Calvary Baptist Church meets from 8 until 9, and if people start streaming in, it's a problem. The church grew quite rapidly, and they formed a building committee who selected a site, and they purchased that from Ross Cortese of the Rossmore Corporation, and they purchased the site, which is now 14,000 Church Place, for $22,000. Ross Cortese made a contribution of an additional $4,000, so he cut the price by $4,000 so that they could purchase it. In 1963, they had some Thanksgiving services that were announced by pastors, and it was noted that the newly formed St. Theodore Canterbury Episcopal Church was having services. Redeemer Lutheran Church was having services. Community Church was having the second year of Thanksgiving services, and a Thanksgiving Mass was being held in the new Catholic Mission Church. Now I'm sure PR is going to give a lot more detail on that. The building plans for the church, Community Church, were approved at an estimated cost of $470,000. The final price tag was $546,000. They had plans for groundbreaking after they had purchased the site, and they thought it was going to be in March, and then it was turned back to April 5th, and then to May 31st, and they said that construction would be completed by early fall 1964. In August of 1964, construction began. And so you can tell that you know, and if you've been involved in any building project, that's the story of building project, always delayed. As the building was constructed, it was constructed out of slabs, and that's another unique thing about Community Church, is the building itself. And if you haven't seen it, drop by someday. It's open Monday through Friday, and you'd be welcome to come in at any time and look at it. It was built of slabs. They first did a huge slab for the floor of the building, which is all on one level, and then they used that cement slab that they poured for the floor as the basis for pouring the walls. They poured the walls out of steel and concrete, and they poured 22 wall sections. And these wall sections were put together. When I told somebody about this, they said, well, how did they fasten them together? And I don't know how they did it. But each of these slabs weighed 22 tons. Then they poured 33 smaller sections, and then they poured the beams. One of the unique things about the church is that every place you look in the church, there's a pie shape, a triangle, and you can see it in the walls. The beams are a triangular shape, just every place you look. And if you don't pay attention to things like that, you're suddenly startled when you realize, as I was sitting in the choir loft last Sunday and looking out, and I thought, no, that's a triangle. The windows are shaped like a triangle. The walls are shaped like a triangle. The chapel is shaped like a triangle, and just going around. And the symbolism there is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. God the Father, the Holy Spirit, and the Son, Jesus. And this symbolism is carried out throughout the church. They also raise money, and a lot of the information that I read about was talking about raising money. Although they said at the very beginning they were not going to have a fundraising drive in order to get that church built. Well, they borrowed money, and of course they accepted any donations that they could receive. And so the church finally was built, and they had their first service in July of 1965. They said it was going to be done in 1964. And at that service, there were something like 2,100 people attending that service. Now, obviously, that was because it was the new kid on the block, and therefore it was one that was of interest to many people. I think the maximum membership of the church reached something like 1,400 or 1,500 people, and at the beginning, the attendance was more than the membership of the church. Well, it was an exciting time. The Women's Fellowship had 32 different circles. They had 765 members and an attendance of 400 or 500 at each of their monthly meetings. They organized the whole community so that there was a steward in every community, and as the units continued to be developed, they had people there to greet the new residents. The church, as with any church, had many different kinds of activities, including worship services. They had monthly forums. They had Bible study and prayer groups. They had a choir that began with 25 members, and before long it formed into 2 choirs, and they had a total of 70 members in the choir. The church has always been multi-denomination. The pastors of the church have represented different denominations. Some of you know John Gunn, who was on the staff there for a while. And he's Baptist. George Dilking, who was supposed to be here tonight, is Congregational, has served on the staff there. We have had Nazarenes on the staff presently. We have Presbyterians, and that's intentional, because it was an intent that we could draw this community, at least the Protestant part of the community, together in community church. Well, again, I invite you to come to see that building if you have a chance. There have been some really beautiful work done by Judson Studios on stained glass windows, and it's I have to say that the attendance is not nearly what it once was, and I guess that may have happened in other churches, but at community church membership is somewhere around 600, and I think that's no secret. But when I came to the church in 1983, it was about 1,200, and I kept losing members every year because more died than joined the church, and so at the present time it's about 600. But it's a great church, and this history of the church is a fascinating history of pioneers who have done really a great job. Thank you.
As Dr. Thilking was expected to be part of the panel tonight, but he suddenly took a trip to the hospital instead yesterday, and we very much miss him and hope that you will all send some good thoughts his way. Mr. E.R. Stevenson is representing the Catholic Church, and I will turn this over to him, and I'm sure he won't have to be motioned to come up here. He'll know.
Thank you. The other day, Claire called me and asked me if I would make a presentation of our history of our church. I said, sure. Then it dawned on me, how do you make a history of your church when it's 2,000 years old? Well, anyway, I'm going to make a quick shot of this thing, and maybe you'll understand. First of all, we believe that Jesus Christ created the Catholic Church. We believe that he summoned 12 of his apostles, 12 members, and he taught them personally for 3 years, and then commissioned them to go to the uttermost parts of the earth to teach the gospel of Jesus Christ. Now, in so doing, he selected one of those members, and his name was Simon Peter. And he said to Simon Peter, "Thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And I will give to thee, Simon, the keys of the kingdom of heaven. And whatsoever you shall bind in heaven shall be bound on earth, and whatsoever shall bind in heaven shall be bound in heaven. And whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven." Now, this is the history of the papacy as far as we're concerned. We believe Simon Peter was given papal infallibility with these words, and that he was to know and teach all truth. And this has gone on now for 2,000 years, and I'm giving Claire a chronological list of all the popes from Peter to John Paul II. Now, as far as our local church is concerned, the church spread throughout the world, but it was gradual. And it didn't arrive on these shores until about 200 years ago, when Father Winipio Serra went from San Diego north towards San Francisco, and he created 21 parish missions. Now, one of those missions is called Our Lady, Queen of the Angels, which is shortly Los Angeles. And little did he know how big that church is going to be. It is the biggest church in the United States. We have 3,500,000 people in that diocese alone. The problem was it got so big that Orange County and Ventura County was a part of it. So they got rid of Orange County by making them a diocese of themselves. This happened in 1976. But before that time, about 10 years or so, in 1962, plans were formulated by a Catholic church in Leisure World, and in the late 1962, the Leisure World Mission Catholic Church was assigned to St. Hedwig's as its mission. St. Hedwig's is the main church up the street here. I think you'll know it when you go by her. Now, this was a mission church for a while. In 1963, Father William J. Mullane was named administrator to the Leisure World Catholic Church. Originally, the Sunday liturgical service took place in Clubhouse 2 and later moved to Clubhouse 3. Ross Cortese donated land for the Catholic Church, and soon our church and the original rectory was constructed on this land and ready for service to the Catholic community. In November 1963, Father Mullane celebrated the first Mass in the new church. The Sunday Mass was at 8 a.m., 10 a.m., and 12 noon. At this time, 2 parish societies were initiated, the Holy Name Society for men and the Little Flower Guild for the women. The new church was dedicated at a special ceremony. Father Mullane passed away August 1st, and he was succeeded by Father Patrick Kelly. That was in 1966. In 1969, the official boundaries were established the new created parish of Holy Family Leisure World. That's when the mission church gave way to being a parish community. In 1970, Father Patrick Kelly died suddenly in Ireland on October the 15th. His successor was Father Anthony Kelly, who later became the first Monsignor to grace the parish. Monsignor Kelly added the Saturday 5 p.m. Mass to the schedule of services. The use of Eucharistic ministers to assist in distribution of the Holy Communion was initiated at that time. Monsignor Kelly became pastor emeritus on September 1st, and Father James Pierce assumed the pastorate of Holy Family. Monsignor Kelly remained pastor emeritus until his death on November 25, 1983. During Father Pierce's administration, many new parish activities have been installed. They include a parish council, which I'm the president and been president for about 15 years, expanded the duties of electors, weekly Holy Communion brought to shut-ins by the Eucharistic ministers, and the Christian service program. In 1977, Monsignor Pierce retired. On September 1977, Father George Breslin became the pastor. In September 1994, Father Breslin died. In 1994, Monsignor Brian P. Coughlin became our current pastor. We have, as of this date, 800 apartment units in Leisure World, 1,200 parishioners, and 40 or 50 members of our church is in Beverly Manor. There are approximately 50 homebound people. And recently we reconstructed or refinished the whole church at great expense, and you're all invited to attend. Come over and visit us.
Last but by no means least, we will invite Rabbi Sidney Guthman to take the podium and tell us something about his early memories of religion in Leisure World.
Well, my friends, a number of you have asked me, how does it feel to be retired? Since I just retired from Congregation Shalom. In fact, I get calls from many friends from around the country. What do you do now that you're retired? I said, for goodness sake, it's magnificent. Now I've got time to finish my book. He said, I didn't know you were writing a book. No, I'm not. I'm reading one. Anyway, my friends, when you talk about historical society, the Jews are the most historical of peoples. Mr. Stevenson talked about 2,000 years. We go back 4,000 years to the days of Moses. And as a matter of fact, when you talk about the synagogue, it's the oldest religious institution in the Western world. It goes back to the 5 books of Moses. Those of you acquainted with the Bible know that one of the chapters, when Moses came down from Mount Sinai, he was delayed, and the Israelites, the ex-slaves, got out of Egypt, were impatient. And they were disillusioned, and so they took the gold earrings and they fashioned a golden calf. A golden calf. But a couple of chapters later, they took the gold earrings and they built a sanctuary, a portable sanctuary in the desert to worship God. And the rabbis in the Talmud commented that they said, with gold earrings they sinned, and with the gold earrings they redeemed themselves. And when they built the sanctuary, Moses said, build me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them. And so, down through the ages, wherever Jews got together, they built a synagogue to worship, a sanctuary. And that's what happened in Leisure World as well. When the Jews came here years ago, the first thing was to get a synagogue going. I remember I was in Long Beach at the time, say 6 years ago, when a delegation from Leisure World came to see me. I was the rabbi of Temple Sinai. In the delegation was, among others, Wolf Herman of blessed memory, former president of the congregation. They said, "Rabbi, can you help us out by getting us a Torah?" That's the scroll, the 5 books of Moses, which are the centerpiece of any synagogue anywhere. I said, "Absolutely, I'll be very happy to do that." And I loaned them a Sefer Torah, which they used here in one of the clubhouses to get the services started. Congregation Shalom had, before I came, other rabbis, Rabbi Steckel and Rabbi Kimmel, both of blessed memory, served for a while. And then about 23 years ago, they asked me if I would not take over when Temple Sinai merged with another synagogue in Lakewood. And of course, I've been there ever since, until my retirement. Now, you know, though synagogue and church may continue to divide us, the spirit of our faith unites us. And though our prayer books may be many, our prayer is one. And so, Congregation Shalom, here in Leisure World, we embrace all Jews, Orthodox, conservative, Reform. You know, you talk about denominations. We heard here from Richard Edgar about the many Protestant denominations. Well, what do we have in Judaism? We have 3 or 4 at the most so-called denominations. What does that compare to the Protestants, who have about 57 varieties? But as a matter of fact, we embrace in our synagogue here in Leisure World all kinds of religious affiliation. Now, you know, I haven't got time to discuss the differences between the 3 so-called denominations among Jews, but one of the cynics said that the difference is that Orthodox Jews, they pray but they don't pay. Reform Jews, they pay but don't pray. Conservative Jews don't pray or pray. But I'll tell you the truth, my friends, the fact remains that over the years, we have maintained here in Leisure World a remarkable synthesis of the 3 groups in one synagogue, serving this community. And since Richard Edgar was kind enough to invite you to come to the community church, let me invite you to come to our congregation on a Friday night at the Sabbath services, where you'll hear the rabbi, a fine rabbi and a fine cantor, conduct the Sabbath services, on Saturday morning as well, the Sabbath. And you're invited to come, regardless of your affiliation or denomination. You know, Claire was kind enough to tell you that I was invited to Washington to give the prayer for the Senate and the House. And that's correct. But I must tell you that when I went to the House of Representatives to give the prayer, when I finished, that was a couple of months ago, the Speaker of the House said, "Rabbi, look up to the ceiling. Look up to the ceiling." I said, "Yes, I looked up to the ceiling. Do you see that picture way up there? A face? An angelic face?" I says, "Yes, I do." "You know who that is?" I said, "I don't." "That's Moses." Moses. What is Moses doing in the House of Representatives? I asked myself. But then I understood very well the reason Moses is there. America is based upon the teachings of the Old Testament. What did Moses say in the book of Leviticus? He said, proclaim liberty throughout the land unto all the inhabitants thereof. This country is founded upon democracy, freedom, liberty. And so it's very appropriate that in the House of Representatives in Washington, they should have at the centerpiece in that magnificent building the picture of Moses, the founder of our faith. And my friends, you know, we are here representing the three major faiths. And as I said before, though synagogue and church may separate us, the spirit of our faith unites us. Have we not all one Father? Hath not one God created us all? And so it's wonderful that we're able to get together under the aegis of the Religious Council with the wonderful leadership of Dr. Walker and to promote this kind of unity. My friends, let me say to you in closing, speaking here to a group of Leisure World residents, remember, it's magnificent to grow old if only you stay young. And the way to stay young is to come to your house of worship. Be identified with your congregation, with your church, with your synagogue. And then the future will be yours to conquer. Thank you.
Now, I can't resist pointing out to you that if you ever get a chance to visit the Religious Council when it meets, then you would really see what fun we can all have representing whatever our various views are. Church people, synagogue people, neither one people, but all people who are unified in some very important ways, the values that we hold sacred. And we have fun when we get together. You would see that there is no doubt that this Leisure World is one of the exciting and delightful places to be in. We enjoy each other's company at the Religious Council, and I think the beautiful thing about Leisure World is that people of Leisure World enjoy each other's company. And they believe that all of the good values, all of the biggest hopes, and the most sacred thoughts of all the people have much more in common than they have dividing them. We have a chance now, I guess. Kenneth, do we have a chance now to ask the audience if they would like to say something?
If anyone would like to comment, they have time to do so. Would anyone like to make a remark or ask a question of anybody? I gather our panel has said it almost all. Correct?
Yeah. I think we heard some very good things tonight. And if you wish to talk to anybody, but not to everybody, I suppose you could probably catch one of the speakers and have a chance to say something to him. I think you could also catch a piece of cake if you get over there to the table. I think I still see pieces sitting on plates and helpless until somebody takes them away. You're invited. Now, we would like to repeat that there's Howard Rolfe sitting back there, and a couple of people told me earlier while we were eating ice cream and cake that they thought it would be sort of fun to join the Historical Society. We hope that you will do that. go back and talk to Howard and tell him that you want to join. We welcome you. We need members. We have a lot of interesting things to do. We have fun together too, just like the Religious Council, and we represent all kinds of points of view. So come and join us and add your point of view. Is there anything else, Tom, that I need to say? Or do you want to say anything? This is our Vice President. And I've been looking around and have seen that some of our honorary members are here tonight, and also some of the very distinguished people of Leisure World are here tonight, and it's awfully good to see them. We believe that their hearts are in the right place when they come out to the Historical Society's program. Now, if there isn't anything else that anybody wants to say to everybody, I will formally adjourn this and hope that you will all go and say something to somebody, and that somebody, for some of you at least, will be Howard Rolfe over there in the corner. See how lonesome he looks. Thank you for coming. It was our pleasure to have you.